The title might be a lie, but it's not completely a lie. Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. As you can tell by the title of today's video, we will be talking about Scream 4. Earlier in the month, I posted a recap of the original Scream trilogy. This is a trilogy that follows a central character named Sidney Prescott. Scream 4 also follows characters related to Sidney Prescott. She is part of the narrative quite heavily, and so even though it follows a main cast of characters that are different than the original three, I did want to include it as this section of the Scream world. I will be doing a recap of 5, 6, and 7 when 7 comes out, hopefully sometime in 2025. I think they will be like their own trilogy, so I want to do those together. In the meantime, today we are talking all about Scream 4. It is personally my second favorite movie in the franchise. In today's video, we are going to be recapping the 4th movie in the franchise. If you didn't see my last one, I would recommend going and watching this because this is sort of connected to them, and characters and reveals and storylines are relevant to the 4th one. And the way that I'm going to be breaking down this video is I'm going to be going so in depth into every scene of the movie that you see that you're gonna get a little sick of it. You're gonna ask me why. Why am I pointing out every little detail, every comment, every conversation? And that is because I want you to guess who the killer or killers are. Are there 2 of them? Is it one of them? Is it someone we've already met before? Is it a main cast of characters? I want you to have all of the information, and I want you to decide for yourself. The first time that I watched this movie, I certainly didn't guess who the killer was, and I found it to be tons of fun when we got to the reveal. So let's just dive right into the recap. So we open the movie with Lucy Hale and her sister sitting on the couch watching a horror movie when they get a phone call. She answers the phone call and she pretty much immediately identifies as a wrong number, and she hangs up. Her and her sister then move into the kitchen and they start talking about her sister's Facebook stalker, about how he never stops messaging her, how he writes her creepy things like he loves her and he's gonna kill her and things like that, when they get another phone call. When Lucy Hale answers the phone again, the person on the other line says, "You hang up again and I'll cut your neck until I feel bone." At which point she hands the phone to her sister, assuming that it's her Facebook stalker, and then after they hang up, the phone rings again and then the doorbell rings. When Lucy Hale opens the door, there's a tree scarily in the shape of a person like holding a knife. The characters don't notice. I don't know if it's like supposed to be a thing, but that's the first thing that I noticed. They go back into the house and Ghostface pops out and they're stabbed by 2 Ghostface. So when they walk into the house, Ghostface jumps out, stabs her sister. Lucy Hale goes to run out, the door opens, and there's another Ghostface. Credits roll, and then you're introduced to 2 blonde women, including Gossip Girl and Sookie Stackhouse. I don't know the actors' names or the characters' names, so I'm just gonna call them by their recognizable names in other things that they've been in. They're talking shit about the Stab series, which is what they're currently watching. They make 3 to 4 jokes about slasher movies until Gossip Girl stabs Sookie repeatedly and says, "Shut the fuck up and watch the movie," revealing the end of Stab 7. We finally rest on 2 women talking about the truth behind Stab in Woodsboro when they hear a noise upstairs. One of the girls goes to investigate while another answers a phone call from an unknown person, revealed to be her friend. In her friend's POV, we hear her friend being stabbed. Upon investigation and another phone call, her dead friend gets thrown through the glass door and Ghostface chases the remaining girl through the house. They finally end in the garage where they recreate the Tate death scene from the first movie. R.I.P. Tate. Love you so much. And that takes us to the Woodsboro town square, decorated with Ghostface costumes, and Sidney Prescott talking to her publicist Rebecca about her new book. Dewey wakes up to a phone call and leaves Gale Weathers in the bed to head into work. He spots Kirby speeding by him, and we jump to following her. We are introduced to Kirby as she is pulling up to Jill and their friend Olivia's house right next door to each other. And Jill is revealed to be Sidney Prescott's cousin, but she says she doesn't really know her all that well. Jill then gets a phone call from Ghostface asking what her favorite scary movie is. After this scene, we switch back to Dewey cleaning up the town square and getting hit on by his deputy, Judy. He gets a call to head to the Randall house that there has been 2 murders. Gail is watching a TV interview back at her office of Sidney talking about her new book and decides to start writing her new book. However, she's kind of creatively stuck. Back at the high school, we are introduced to 2 guys filming people, Robbie and Charlie, asking them questions, like asking random people questions and live streaming on a camera attached to their heads. One of them asks Jill as they're walking up what her favorite scary movie is, and after some banter about Kirby, we cut to Jill and her creepy ass boyfriend Trevor fighting about their breakup. Trevor is one of the most frustrating characters in this entire franchise, and we'll get into why. Gail shows up to Sidney's book signing in the Woodsboro bookstore, followed by Dewey, who is shutting down the signing and claims it as a police event, and tells Gail there's a phone connected to the 2 murders in the bookstore. When they call it, they follow the ringing to Sidney's rental car. They open the trunk and it's full of pictures of her, the cell phone, a knife, and the pictures are covered in blood. At the police station, Gail has a tiff with Judy about trying to get into an interview with Sidney and Dewey. Dewey and Gail get into a fight about why she should be allowed on the case. Dewey claims that she's not an investigator anymore, she's not a reporter anymore. Gail says, well, I've helped you solve murders previously, so I should be allowed on the case. And after their fight, she tells the deputy, Judy, that her lemon squares taste like ass. Gail, ever the classy queen. Jill goes into an interview with Dewey and Sidney about the threatening phone calls that they got that morning in the car on the drive to school, and then Sidney says she wants to leave town because she thinks that Ghostface is after her again, but she's told that she's not only a suspect because of what was found in her trunk, but also that at the very least she is an eyewitness. They also tell her that there will be a surveillance team on her. Outside of the police station, Rebecca, Sidney's publicist, fangirls over Gail. They have an exchange that ends in a quippy remark from Gail to the publicist, and then Gail storms off, calling back to the second movie where we had the reporter that was obsessed with Gail. At Jill's house, Sidney and Dewey talk about the relationship between Gail and Dewey makes the remark that he is a small town, this is a small town, and he is a small town husband, alluding to the fact that Gail maybe doesn't have the most illustrious career and relationship that she wants or once had. He says that everything will resolve itself and it's no big deal, but we're left a little bit sad for Dewey in this scenario. Maybe Gail is a little bit unhappy with her current life. Later that night, Jill finds Trevor in her bedroom. He says she would be a lot safer with him, and when she asserts that she doesn't trust him, he says that he'll earn her trust back. He attempts to kiss her, but Sidney ends up opening the door and he rushes to the window. She makes a comment about Jill reminding her of herself after Trevor leaves through the bedroom window. Out in the hallway, as she's leaving Jill's room, Sidney sees Judy in the shadows just standing there, and Judy gets into a whole long monologue about don't you remember me and how they knew each other in high school and they were in a school play together. And as she's recounting these events, she walks out of the shadows of the hallway into kind of like the general vicinity of Sidney. Sidney admits that she doesn't remember her and that so much has gone on since then, and Judy says, oh, it's fine, and leaves. Later on, while hanging out, Jill and Kirby call their friend Olivia, who is alone at her house right next door. While Jill is talking to Olivia on the phone, Kirby answers a call from Trevor on Jill's phone. When he talks, the person on the other line is using the Ghostface voice. Kirby thinks that it is Trevor, and he keeps saying that he's not Trevor and he wants to talk to Jill. He then asks Kirby how the movie they're watching is, and when she says, how do you know, he claims that he is standing in the closet. When they go to open it, it's empty, and Ghostface says, "Who said I was standing in that closet?" He pops out of Olivia's closet in her house and starts stabbing her. Jill and Kirby watch the stabbings happen through the window that you can see Olivia's house, like from Jill's bedroom to Olivia's bedroom. There's a window and you can watch through. They're shouting and yelling, and Sydney races over to the house to save Olivia, but not before Ghostface dangles Olivia's body outside of the window, which is a callback to not only Tate, but also to a murder in the third movie. Once Sydney makes it upstairs, she discovers Olivia's body laying in the bed with her intestines hanging out. Olivia's phone then gets a call, and Sydney and Ghostface go back and forth, in which Ghostface says things like he has plans for her and that she'll suffer. Jill arrives, gets stabbed by Ghostface, and Sydney tussles with him through the house. When the police arrive, he's gone, and Trevor and Kirby show up pretty much immediately and pull Jill out of the house. And then when Sydney leaves, there's a angry mob yelling at her, and Jill walks up and basically says, "I'm sorry for blaming you for what's going on." We then see a scene of Dewey talking to Adam Brody and Deputy Perkins, and he asks them what the situation is. Why weren't they watching? Why weren't they taking care of Sydney? Why did this happen? They were supposed to be surveilling. And they say something along the lines of we weren't paying attention. And they crossed each other. They saw Ghostface in the back of the house, and they went to go chase him, and they ended up crossing each other's paths, which just proves that the Woodsboro PD continues to be a terrible police department, and I don't know why they even exist. Outside of the scene, Charlie and Robbie show up live streaming the crime scene with the headset that they have, and then Gail shows up and offers to cut a deal with the Cinema Boys. That's what I'm gonna call them, Charlie and Robbie, and basically says, if you provide footage that you catch, I will attend your cinema club meetings at your high school, and I'll get Sydney to attend. At the hospital, Sydney is given the all clear, and Rebecca approaches her about a third book deal and calls her fans unlucky fucks who need her so that they don't jump off a bridge, and Sydney fires her. In the parking garage of the hotel, Rebecca gets a call from Ghostface. They kind of tussle around the garage a little bit. Her car won't start, and ultimately Ghostface stabs her before she can get to safety. During a press conference in which Dewey is talking to the press, saying that they have the murders under control and they don't think that it's connected to Sydney, Rebecca's body is thrown off of the building onto a parked car. Gail and Dewey then start fighting about Gail's involvement, and she makes the statement, "Once you're back on Team Gail, we can talk." At a cinema club meeting, Sydney and Gail are attending, and Charlie and Rob say that one day everybody will be live streaming, and that's what the killer is missing. Because to be the new version, the murders should be filmed. Before the killer gets caught, they should upload the killings to make their art infamous. They talk about working on a screenquel together and go through the list of rules for a horror remake, recalling the Randy's role in the whole thing. They then mention something having to happen at a party as per the rules of a remake, and they let it slip that there is a stab-a-thon party happening that night, but they refuse to give the location to Gail and Sydney, and Trevor gives them a weird death glare as Gail and Sydney storm off. At the house, Sydney and Jill have a heart-to-heart, and after their conversation, Sydney sees a shadow move in and out of the door frame. Kirby arrives at the stab-a-thon party. She's on the phone with Jill, trying to get her to come to the party. Jill says no, and then Kirby tells her that Trevor is there. When she goes in, it's just a typical teen party with Ghostface decor and people wearing masks, and Gail enters wearing a mask, a Ghostface mask, and places cameras around the party. When she gets back into her car, she notices her cameras are being covered up by one, and Ghostface picks up the last camera, flashes his face, and then cuts it off. Gail calls Dewey to tell him that the murderers are there, in which she says, "How meta can you get?" Gail goes back inside to fix her cameras. Dewey stops to watch the feeds in Gail's car and sees Ghostface run up behind her to stab her. Gail and Ghostface tussle. Dewey tries to shoot Ghostface. Gail gets stabbed and pushed off the hayloft, and Ghostface gets away. Gail then tells Dewey that she found a webcam that wasn't hers and that Ghostface was recording the murders. Back at the Prescott house, the two cops banter about cops dying in horror movies before Adam Brody decides to do a perimeter sweep. Inside, Sydney hears something and goes outside to investigate. Adam finds a window in the house open, and then Sydney goes back inside. The two cops then get murdered near their house, near the cruiser. Sydney again hears something outside, and Sydney's sister jump scares her. Her sister goes back out to the car. Sydney answers a phone call from Ghostface, and Ghostface tells her to turn on the news where they're talking about the attack at the party. He then alludes to her family being injured, and when she rushes upstairs to find Jill, Jill is gone and her laptop is open to a text to Kirby. They get chased by Ghostface out the front door and the back door, and Sydney's sister gets stabbed through the door's mail slot. As she's dying, she says, "Tell Jill I'm sorry." As Sydney's leaving, she runs into Judy, who claims she saw someone coming from the side of the house. Once Judy goes to investigate the dead body of Sydney's sister, Sydney races out of the house. And at the hospital, Gail and Dewey say their I love yous and kind of like make up with each other. They don't talk about anything, but they basically just like make up. Kirby, Jill, Charlie, and Robbie are back at Kirby's house after the stabathon party was broken up because of the stabbings. And Trevor shows up. Fucking Trevor shows up. He says Jill invited him, that she texted him, and then Jill discovers that her phone is missing. She says she's gonna go check out Kirby's car to see if it's in there. Once Kirby points out that he got a new phone, Trevor claims that he got a new one, and Kirby calls it very convenient, and Trevor storms off. Judy calls Dewey from the Prescott house to tell him about the murders of Sydney's sister and that Sydney ran off. Robbie goes out on the back porch while he's live streaming. Kirby and Charlie start kissing in the living room, only to be interrupted by Trevor again, who says that he can't find Jill and goes upstairs when Kirby claims that's where Jill is. Robbie gets stabbed by Ghostface out on Kirby's lawn. Kirby hears something and runs into Jill coming down the stairs. Jill claims that she never saw Trevor upstairs, and when they open the front door to see Sydney, followed by Robbie and Ghostface. Jill and Sydney run through the house. Sydney tries to trick Ghostface away from Jill, who is hiding under a bed, and Sydney climbs across the roof. My girl loves roofs, while talking to Dewey. After she tells him that she's at Kirby's house and to come quick, she gets clotheslined by Ghostface and she tumbles off the roof. The police race to Kirby's house, and back inside, Sydney runs into Kirby, who says that the phone lines are down and they have no internet. They hear footsteps and lock themselves downstairs. Charlie comes banging on the glass door, but Kirby won't let him in. Ghostface comes up behind him and drags him out of sight of the camera. The lights come up and he's tied to the chair like the opening scene in the original Scream, and Kirby gets a call from Ghostface. Sydney tells her to keep him distracted and she leaves to go find Jill. Ghostface asks her some trivia questions, and when Sydney tries to find Jill, she can't. Kirby goes through a series of Ghostface questions, and when she gets the final question right, she goes out onto the patio to untie Charlie, and after she unties him, he stabs her and says, "Kirby, this is making a movie," and alludes to her dying because she didn't notice his presence until then. Sydney gets tackled by Charlie and gets stabbed by another Ghostface on her way out, kind of the two-door situation. Ghostface takes his mask off to reveal it is Jill. Charlie and Jill talk about making the movie while holding Sydney at knife point. They also drag Trevor outside of a closet where he has been tied up. Charlie gives Jill a gun, which she shoots Trevor with, and reveals their plan to frame Trevor for the murders and make it seem like he filmed all of them for Jill. They equate Jill to Sydney, Charlie to Randy, and Trevor to Billy. Jill says, "We're gonna know fame like you've never dreamed of." And Jill has an entire monologue about growing up related to Sydney and how she always heard about how special Sydney was. And while holding a gun to Sydney, Jill stabs Charlie in the chest and says she's going to be the sole survivor. She says, "I don't need friends, I need fans, and it's about becoming you," to Sydney. "Look around, we're all on the internet. How do you think anybody gets famous anymore?" She stabs Sydney and then starts setting the scene in one of the greatest endings to a movie in my personal opinion. She wipes her fingerprints off of the gun and puts it next to Charlie. She stabs herself in the shoulder by holding the knife to her shoulder and then running herself into a wall. She jumps onto a glass table and rips her hair and nails out and scratches her face. And then finally, as she hears the police arriving, she lays down next to Sydney and poses in the same pose that Sydney is laying in. And then as they're leaving the house on the gurney, Jill gets bombarded by reporters who call her a hero, and she is smiling. At the hospital, she wakes up to find Dewey telling her that Sydney didn't die and that she is in the ICU and there's a possibility that she could live. After Dewey leaves, Jill unplugs herself and goes to find Sydney's hospital room. Dewey then goes into Gail's room where she's still recovering from the stab wound at the Stabathon party, and after Dewey makes a comment about Jill wanting to write a book with Gail because they got similar injuries, Gail makes a connection that Jill shouldn't know about the injury, and Dewey says something along the lines of, "Aw, fuck," and races off. In Sydney's room, Jill tries to strangle Sydney. Sydney gouges her eye and they wrestle around the room. Dewey shows up and Jill smacks him repeatedly with a bedpan. After knocking him out, she takes his gun and aims it at Sydney. Gail arrives, gets tackled by Judy, who is forced to give Jill her gun. Jill shoots Judy and turns her gun on Gail. Sydney cranks up the defibrillator, and as Gail says, "Clear," Sydney shocks Jill in the head. Sydney then says, "You forgot the first rule of the remakes, Jill. Don't fuck with the original." Jill grabs a shard of glass, but before she can stab Sydney, Sydney shoots her with the gun. Judy gets back up, showing her bulletproof vest, and as the movie closes, the media is outside the hospital talking about Jill being a hero, and we close with her open-eye dead stare. And that is it. That is Scream 4. I love this movie. I think this is a fantastic reveal. Scream consistently through the entire franchise stays with the times without using technology and social media in like a gross, weird way. Something that movies like Texas Chainsaw Massacre do is they use cell phones in like a very weird way, in a very convenient or inconvenient way. It never really fits in with the story, whereas I think the entire point of Scream is how horror slashers make fun of and mirror real life, and so they use technology and the innovation of technology in such an interesting way. I think the inclusion of Charlie and Robbie live streaming everything and the use of cell phones and text messages and all of that is so good without being cliche or clunky with the storyline. It makes a lot of sense, and that's sort of a reoccurring theme in the franchise, and this sort of just reinforces that use of like modern day without being weird. And I think this is a great reveal. I think it's a great continuation of the Scream franchise. I think it's a much better movie than even really the second and third movie. I like the second one okay. I think the reveals in the second one are good. The third one is just a whole mess, and I will be doing a video of like all of the drama and stuff that happened with the third one. including like who the original killer was supposed to be, all of the rewrites, all of that kind of stuff, and why I think the third one ended up so bad. But yeah, 4 I think is incredible. It's my favorite. It's my second favorite movie. There are some movies later on in the like second trilogy that I think could possibly take the second spot. Nothing's gonna take the spot of the original, but there are certainly very good movies in that second trilogy that I might change up my tier ranking in when I rewatched those, but this movie is amazing. So I would love to talk about the movie down below. If you're a Scream fan, I would love to know. If you're just watching this for background noise, I would love to know that as well. I hope you guys are looking forward to all of these sorts of videos. Kind of just watch my videos for my vlogs or my streams. I would love to know if you enjoyed this. I'm very much looking forward to this new type of video for my channel, this new type of creativity for myself, and I would love to hear your thoughts. If you figured out that it was Jill and Charlie, or at least one of the Cinema Boys, I would love to hear that as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in my next one.